It's the 20th of January 2021, 22. It'll be a while before I stop saying 2021 a bit. Each year in January, I'll smurf up maybe half of the presentations at the beginning by saying 2021. It's 2022. We got 135 nuclear stories to run into. And we're just going to barely touch any of them, I'm sure. Atoms for Humanity. The A-10 Warthog only shoots depleted uranium munitions. They're dirty bombs. They're not actually depleted. They're just no good for the fuel cycle. And the A-10 Warthog shoots 1.5 tons a minute of dirty bombs. All it shoots is dirty bombs. And that's equal to around 44,000 Nagasaki-size bombs of the low-level radiation. And low-level, in this case, is nasty. Speaking of nasty, 14 prefectures in Fukushima are unfit for consumption, but the nuclear industry has been put in key positions around the world, and countries are now being poisoned. Canada is so wicked, it started shipping food in after 93 days after the tsunami, with no restrictions. And so Japan never had anybody else to ship it to, so Canada has been destroyed, and the diseases now are manifesting everywhere. And it's called, the cover story is called Coronavirus. I mean, how evil, growing food, harvesting it right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation. Nuclear has no right to exist once you see something like that. Japan government urges support Japanese government. And this is Food Navigator. This is a pro-nuclear site set up to look like just mom and pop operation. Japan government urges support for UK proposed lift up Fukushima import restrictions from a nuclear wasteland. And they're only talking about Fukushima, they're not talking the fact that 55 countries borrowed food from 14 prefectures, half of Japan. Go ahead and eat it if you're stupid. Go ahead and eat it if you got billions of dollars to spend on medical. Go ahead and eat it if you want your children to get sick and die. Knock your socks off. Japan is hopeful. Japan has crossed all lines since Fukushima nuclear meltdown, and have shown themselves to be unworthy of being on this planet with the rest of us. This is Japan right here. Look, they're in that yellow car, and they're racing across an icy pond. And when the car finally starts to sink, they get up on the back of the car and they take a selfie. Wait for it. There it is. That's Japan on a sinking car taking a selfie. That's the epitome of what Japan is doing. Every house on Tonga Island destroyed, as pictures show catastrophic. So that tsunami that they played down actually was 45 feet high. Imagine if there was a nuclear reactor in that area. Not a single home remained on Mango Island, which was home to about 50 people. It was a 50-foot tsunami ran through their island. That's 43 miles away from the volcano. I was trying to figure out what the hell was going on because I was late on this story. I still am. It said ripples into outer space. It was so powerful. Vietnamese workers were punched, beaten, and kicked repeatedly over several years because he wouldn't pick up bags of radioactive fallout. France should revisit plan to shut nuclear units, said regulators, because France is supposed to close down. And look at this. This is a French plant surrounded by farms. How do you get that evil that you build your nuclear power plants in farmland on purpose? Because you know the food is going to be shipped out all the time. It means there's less background radiation around a nuclear power plant. And that the people who eat it will get sick and die and have debilitating illnesses and devastate the entire family and communities. How do you get that evil? How does that actually work? How do you say, hey, that's a career for me? How does that work, I wonder? I think the people that said, let's build it in a nuclear power plant in a farmland, never mind. It ain't very nice, what I think should happen to those people. Holding in the deep what Canada wants to do with its decade-old pile-up of nuclear waste. The narwhale. Canada plans to store spent nuclear fuel deep underground near the Great Lakes. Call it Great Lakes because they're the biggest freshwater repository in North America. The third biggest in the world. That is, if an industry group can find a community willing to play host. And the community has a couple of criteria. The first criteria is it has to have active farmland. I'm not kidding you. I've been covering this for years. Now, why do you need to put it in the community when you know the community is going to say no? Because that way you can't come up with solutions, see? It's the same worldwide. Every country does the exact same thing. Well, we wanted a nuclear plant there. We spent 5 years and it looked good and nobody would take the nuclear waste, so we had to go somewhere else. And the definition of evil doesn't do it justice to what this despicable critter known as nuclear is up to. Seismic hazards in site evaluation for nuclear installations. Yeah, you got to spend about $500 million to survey the land where they're going to put a nuclear waste or nuclear power plants. $500 million. It usually takes 5 years to do the studies, and the studies are meant to absolve the nuclear power plant of liability if there's an event later on. The mothership at the pulsing heart of a town's growth gone nuclear. Again, this is Bruce Nuclear. Bruce Power, which is Canadian, scum, coward, weirdos. These are incredible weirdos, eh? Lake Huron Beach County has ignited the economic fortunes of the surrounding areas. First off, it's all taxpayers' money. Bruce Power ain't doing jack shit, only spending taxpayers' money. Volcanic eruption near Tonga more powerful than a nuclear bomb. They say it was equal to 600 times as powerful as a nuclear bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima, which is a 15 kiloton uranium bomb, and the plutonium bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. But 600 times as powerful, was over half as powerful as the Bravo bomb. And it didn't have radioactive fallout. Like, comparing it to a nuclear bomb is despicable. Again, this is the norm. Return to Fukushima, last deserted town. 5 people. I didn't know people in Japan can count that high, to tell you the truth. Moved back to the uninhabited Futaba, which is 2 kilometers away from nuclear meltdown. And we got a poll tonight asking that very question. Is encouraging people to live 2 kilometers from Fukushima multiple ongoing nuclear reactor meltdowns evil? We have somebody said it's not evil. That's hard to imagine. Must have been a mistake, was it? Surely there can't be somebody out there that's stupid they would vote no. I suppose the nuclear industry could be watching the videos, right? Why would you, the reactors are still melting down. And all they done was scratched up the topsoil in the community. That's it. You can't decontaminate a community. First off, that's right alongside ongoing nuclear meltdowns because it's going to be contaminated again 15 minutes later. Not 16 minutes, but 15 minutes later. And that you're talking about an absurd amount of radiation in that zone. Because normally there's a farm there to suck up the radiation and poison you later on. Scraping away layers of topsoil aimed to decontaminate the region. And so the people that wrote that, I'd have no problem at all kicking their teeth down their throat. There's an old dilapidated building surrounded by 1-ton bags of radiation in that same community. We've covered it so many times, it doesn't seem real that there's people actually evil enough to do it. 5 people moved back, whoopie-doo, less than 1%. Town where Fukushima plant is located lets residents stay overnight. And these are, shockingly, none of these are Japanese newspapers. These are like France's 24, MAILONLINE, United Kingdom's tabloids. Normally it's just the Japanese scum media. Town where Fukushima plant is located lets gullible people stay overnight. In Futaba, 2 kilometers from ongoing nuclear meltdowns. And he moved away from the nuclear meltdown to a place known as Minamisoma, which is around 20 million becquerels per kilogram in the soil over there. And that was, by the way, was a ghost town for 5 years. And he tricked a few people into going back in there. Evacuation orders on the other side of the plant is called Okuma, which is the other town that hosts the plant, were lifted in 40% of the community in 2019, and less than 3% of the population had returned. Like, when you can't cross the street in your community because of radiation, and you decide you're going to live there, you're a victim, and the nuclear industry is a criminal for doing this to them. Convince people that it was safe when it absolutely can't be safe. Why is this planet sitting in silence? I don't understand it. Scientists traced the path of radioactive cesium. Another fake story, right? By the National Institute of Environmental Studies in Japan. Radiocesium. In the aftermath of the Fukushima nuclear accident, the Japanese government performed intensive decontamination, which they didn't. The Japanese government didn't do nothing. The homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language did, but the Japanese government didn't. Removing soil surface layers, which is only 3% of the community that they can do that into, by the way, total, over 11 years. And a major affected region consists of dense, uninhabited forest where such decontamination strategies are not feasible. So finding ways to avoid the spread of radioactive contaminants like radiocesium, and it's absurd to just use the words radiocesium. So whoever, if they're an academic and they're only using the words radiocesium, they should have their degree taken away and their head pulled right off their shoulders. Like, we need something like a wood chipper to get rid of these people once we convict them of their crimes. Radiocesium. It's called brainwashing, right? Radiocesium. And it's a lot more than that. I was just lighting up random ones. Oh, and the ultimate lie, fertilizing contaminated areas. Think about this statement, right? You got a nuclear wasteland. They're claiming that if you go in there and spread potassium, is an effective strategy to suppress the biological absorptions of radiocesium. This is ludicrous assertions. This is absurdness. To suggest that radiocesium is the only issue, or that plutonium is going to displace radiocesium. They take up different places. You can't displace man-made fission products, you demonic, despicable creatures, you hideous, unbelievable, hideous nuclear industry. I'm burnt out. I'm so busted up. I can barely move tonight. Give it to me, baby. Anytime you're ready, pewter. I deleted 50,000 of these clicks like that there. Yesterday, it speeded up everything. Look at that. Hang on. Bingo. So why me? Yeah, well, we can't do too much of this because it's a lunatic industry. No doubt about that. So they talk about radiocesium, but for every cesium, aka radiocesium, there's 100 times radiostrontium-90 created, and equal amounts of strontium-86 and many other fission products. Cesium is just 137, is just one of many cesiums. It's going to be loaded with neptunium. It's going to be loaded with americium and plutonium, which is what the reactors run on, and uranium. And krypton, it's going to be absurd numbers, xenons, and all kinds of fission daughters. These are all the daughters of each one. So all of those acronyms up there will have similar amounts of daughters. Here's one of the daughters that hit Canada and the United States. This is a study from Ottawa, Canada. The west coast of the northern hemisphere was hit with 220 million atoms per liter of man-made anthropogenic iodine-129. So that goes in the thyroid glands of insects and birds and mammals and animals and humans. And you're producing radioactive hormones with it. It also assimilates throughout the body, but this stuff will saturate. You can't get rid of it because there's so much. There's so much. And it's got a 15 million year half-life. Help Wanted Ad seeks employees that can carry out a conversation at the nuclear meltdowns. Does that sound like nuclear scientist to anybody, or is that just me being picky? Radioactive rain caused 130 schools to close in Korea, and it wasn't for radiocesium, you sack of excrements in the nuclear industry. I think everybody in the nuclear industry, there's more than enough evidence to support the execution of everybody in the nuclear industry. Legally, right? I don't care how we do it. We can do it illegally. That's fine with me too. If we can get a couple million people together and get it over with, the night of the long knives, we'll bring it back to life. Treated water. Now, first off, treated water from Fukushima Nuclear Power Plant is safe to be discharged into the sea. Treated water. You can't treat water that is ran over and melted reactor cores. First off, the filter is so radioactive after 15 minutes, you can never get in the building again or even close to it. It's absurd to suggest that you can filter out the water. Second off, they had 1,000 tanks, which is what they got today, by the way, in 2013. And in 2014, they had 1,200 tanks. 2017, they had 900 tanks. 2021, they had 1,000 tanks. 2022, they got 8,000 tanks. We counted the tanks, by the way. There was 750. And so this expert, who's a professor from a university, should be publicly executed for what he's doing. And whoever wrote the story should be publicly executed too. There's no other way around this. That's the only thing we got. We got to advocate for public execution of people that lie in the nuclear industry and poison the environment for millions of years. Reconstruction Agency, which is not a reconstruction agency at all, which is it's a genocide machine trying to trick people moving back into a nuclear wasteland while the nuclear meltdowns are still ongoing. Scientists traced the path of radioactive cesium in the ecosystem of Fukushima. So they're not being honest when they talk about radio cesium, because curium fission products are the biggest byproducts of the radiated fuel rods. And curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium, which is 20 times thicker than you do for cesium. Will the TSAI administration lift the barriers on food imports from Fukushima? So like people that advocate murdering everybody in a country with radioactive food, what should be the penalty if not the death penalty? Is there something else? We give them a slap on the wrist? Don't do it again? Is the world really that full of cowards? Am I the only person on the planet that have common sense left? Yeah, what's the consequences for ruining the Pacific? James Lucid is asking. Really, what's the consequences? And he's being very polite by saying ruin the Pacific. The expeditions that I've done is an extinction event. You can check it out at the nuclearproctologist.org. Now, I covered this particular facet last night because the Taipei Times was carrying out sedition against Taiwan by trying to get Japan's lethal food indiscriminately shipped into the country with no checks and balances, which is what they're doing anyway. But it's such a evil thing to do, to poison people with food, because it's indiscriminate. So it gets children and elderly too, right? It's a terrible way to die on top of that. And in a rational world, everybody would pick up pitchforks and whatever and go get rid of these people immediately. And police have turned into cowards now. It's okay to murder everybody. It's a crime to say don't. Welcome to stupid world, Earth. Discharge of tritium from the Fukushima plant not harmful for health. First off, you're pouring water over a reactor core. And what they're trying to do is trick you into thinking they captured all the water, that they filtered all the water, and that the only thing left is tritium. This is the most ludicrous, insane, horrific betrayal in human history. First off, this is one of the plumes. This is after 19 days, covering the Pacific and the Atlantic within just 20, 30 days with a continuous plume of horrific radiation. Wake up, you silly planet you. Wake up and fight back, for goodness sakes. This is what's left of Reactor 4. That's the fake Reactor 3 dome, which they built off-site and brought it in, laid it there, and then pretended that it was perfectly normal reactor on the inside. You can't go inside of these things. They're nuclear meltdowns. Like, the story's so implausible, I can understand that people can't believe it's real. But you better smarten up. It's time to grow up. It's time to gut up. Time to make a stand instead of being a zero all your lives. not to my regular people, but I'm talking about to the regulatory agencies, to the police, to the government agencies. You got to stop being monsters, for goodness sakes. You're not going to be able to cash your checks soon, morons. The water contains tritium. Now, anybody that tells you that tritium is all that's in those tanks, they should be drowned in a bucket of tritium immediately. They say our daily food includes radioactive materials. They're talking about natural, harmless, indigenous, stupid, everyday elements from the solar system. Nothing from Fukushima is from the solar system. That's what we call it man-made. So an adult man keeps about 7,000 becquerels of radioactivity in his body is potassium. And you don't get 7,001 becquerels in your body. Your body doesn't bioaccumulate it. It only holds as much as you need. It's called homeostasis. But radiation from nuclear accidents will bioaccumulate. You can have 1,000,000 becquerels in your body, and that's called leukemia at that stage. But your body doesn't attack potassium or white blood cells and build a tumor around it. And so the person that wrote that, I would absolutely love to kick the shit out of you. I'd love to curb stomp you. You despicable, disgusting parasite. You revolting parasite. You horrific parasite. You despicable scumbag. Trickle of residents returned to Fukushima, France 24. It's unusual for the world media to report on this stuff, so big kickbacks. France, of course, unbelievably evil. Following extensive decontamination, numerous areas around the plant in northern Japan have been cleared safe, and whoever done that should be tied, each leg tied onto a transport truck, and the transport truck go into a different direction until they just pulled that piece of shit apart. They should have put it on YouTube so I can play it every morning when I wake up and enjoy it. Look at him. I did love that. I watch that every day for the rest of my life. So that you can have a future. You got no future if you just keep sitting there with your thumb up your butt and another one in your mouth. You got to speak out. They're terrified of you. You're the most powerful thing on this planet. France should revisit plan to shut the nuclear units. They got 10 units going to go offline. And France is already in total panic mode because 4 reactors broke down. Had incredible dangerous flaws, actually. Holding in the deep. What Canada wants to do is decade-old pile of nuclear pile up. It's around 5 million pounds or something. Of lethal by the pound. If there was a pound, say, 50 feet away from me, I'd be dead right now before I got this far into the show. Canada plans to store... No, Canada gave the nuclear industry the right to figure out what to do with the nuclear waste. Because they're too stupid to come up with solutions on their own. And they gave it to the nuclear industries whose solution is going to be the cheapest thing imaginable. Oh, we're going to dig a hole in the ground, put it down there, and run away, Dana. That's a great idea, Dana. Don't ever say it to my face, scumbag. If an industry group can find a community willing to play host, and that'll never happen, right? This is on purpose. And the nuclear waste is still splitting the atoms. That's released into the environment where it's pulsing energy every second for the next 1,000,000 years. And to put it in context, 2 million atoms can fit on the head of a needle, but you can't see them. So how many atoms do you need to power 1,000,000 homes? If you can put 2 million atoms on the head of a needle and you can't see it. It's a lot, right? It's beyond all the stars in the solar system, all the grains of sands and all the beaches on the planet. Each day from each reactor fuel pool hemorrhaging into the environment. Like, this is absurdness. Why kill the planet? What's the point of this? The simple thing to do is not kill the planet. The easiest thing to do is not kill the planet. The hardest thing to do is just sit in silence and let the planet die. I don't understand why my voice is one of the rare voices on the planet that nobody on the planet has acknowledged that facet of fuel pools are still splitting the atom, by the way, which is why it's in the fuel pool in the first place. And then that's why they're surrounded by farms. The industry-backed nuclear waste management organization, industry-backed, industry ran. Like, who gives a shit if it's industry-backed? Can find a willing host. I got to move on to this next subject because I'm getting angry now. The mothership at the pulsing heart of a town, growth gone nuclear. We already covered that, didn't we? Yeah, we covered that. The sack of shit. You sack of shit, Bruce Powers, CEO. Redneck. Red check. What a disgusting parasite he turned out to be. What a despicable sack of shit that creature turned out to be. What a revolting sack of shit he is. Chart a course for the cheer redneck and now occupies as chief executive at the center of a massive multi-year $13 billion plus overhaul of the Canadian nuclear powerhouse. So when Fukushima melted down, within a couple of months they secured $13 billion because they were afraid Canadians were going to wake up and demand an end to nuclear. Not only that, within 3 months, Bruce Power led the charge on removing the ban on Fukushima food for Canada. At day 93, Canada, with no checks whatsoever, for the last 11 years have been shipping lethal disease factory known as Fukushima food into Canada. It's so criminal, it defies any kind of explanation of how insane that is. I can't actually articulate how insane it is because you're talking about 1,800 illnesses. Everybody in Canada has been poisoned just by the food because Japan can't ship it anywhere else. Evil, Bruce Evil Center. Just you can't, every time you come to Bruce Power, all you can say is like evil. And not only that, they got, we'll get to it coming up. A strong, healthy future starts right here. Clean energy frontier. So calling nuclear clean energy. Big signs in the communities. They don't even understand, well, they understand how evil they are. They're just incapable of not being evil. They couldn't get a job if they weren't evil. Most states are considering nuclear energy to cut emissions. It's simply not true. And then that's EcoWatch promoting nuclear. Some officials are concerned renewables like solar and wind will not generate enough energy to power the country. 2021, there was 333 nuclear power plants where the renewables came online. By 2026, it'll be 4,800 gigawatts online, which is equal to 5,500 nuclear power plants. And if you use compressed air storage, where you pump air down to a mine shaft, or pump hydro, where you pump water up a hill with excess energy, and not only that, 4,800 kilowatts gigawatts is more energy than all nuclear power plants currently on the planet and all fossil fuel plants on the planet combined. And so what you're seeing is the nuclear industry is panicking. It's called a drowning man, where anybody tries to rescue them, they'll drown them. French nuclear sector may need Marshall Plan of aid, says head of Watchdog. And France, of course, why did France wait until now, this year, before they said, We're going to build more nuclear. All your plants are decrepit, old, and breaking down, and now you're going to, like, last year, 333 nuclear power plants of renewables came online. You can't build 333 nuclear power plants in 12 months or 12 years or 1,200 years anymore because the industry is completely reliant upon old technology. You may need a Marshall Plan to survive, said the head of France's nuclear watchdog. There is no nuclear watchdog, by the way, and France ain't got one. China plays a discrete but critical role in Iran's nuclear negotiations. Again, this is France 24 reporting on this. Well, Iran won't have nothing to do with the Americans, so they got France. They say to France, tell American, piss off. China says, America, piss off. What do drone attacks mean for the Iran nuclear talks? So there was drone strikes somewhere else close to the nuclear power plant. So if you hit an active nuclear power plant with a drone strike, that's terrorism. And which is, we assume Israel is going to be doing. North Korea suggests may resume nuclear missile tests. You can't blame them. I don't advocate it, but I don't blame them. How can you blame them after what the United Nations done to North Korea? The first act of the United Nations was to slaughter North Korea. The second act was to isolate it, land, sea, and air embargoes for over 60 years. What the hell, man? It's not United Nations, it's 195 militaries. North Korea says it will consider its moratorium on nuclear, long-range missiles. There's a whole lot of headlines like that today. Meet the nuclear sleuth shaking up U.S. spy crafts. And so when you get a former Pentagon strategist, look, first off, the Pentagon has 29,000 public relation firms, or people work, 29,000 public relation officers working for the Pentagon. If they work for the Pentagon, then their word is worthless. It's worthless. They're genocide machines. And so he was a former Pentagon strategist. He was teaching at Georgetown University because that's where evil works. He asked the students to study the Chinese tunnel system. And the students said they got around 3,000 nuclear weapons down there when the most they had was 200. Austria gears up to fight EU green nuclear energy plan. Austria, of course, is anti-nuclear. And they're going to take the EU to court over their green financing, promoting scumbag nuclear. And all they got to do is get the permits, according to the EU, by 2045, and it's still considered green. This, first off, like by 2026, renewables are going to replace all nuclear and all current fossil fuel plants on the entire planet. Why are you bothering with nuclear, morons? Senate committee advances, and you can't use nuclear weapons on top of that, because you can't cash your checks anymore. Senate committee advances bill lifting restriction on nuclear power plant constructions. And you got your useful idiots, useful morons. A bill that would lift restrictions on nuclear power plant construction in West Virginia. And they even talk about small modular reactors like they exist when they don't exist. IAEA completes first review of nuclear higher education degree. Like the IAEA is not an organization at all. It's a nuclear lobbying group. And they admit it, their job is to promote nuclear. And all they do is they take nuclear technology and figure out, how do we get that into your life? Where can we use it? They actually use americium in smoke detectors. Rather than store it for a million years, You put it in your home for a couple. When it breaks, you do what with it? You throw it in the garbage, right? If the nuclear industry takes the same uranium, puts it in the garbage, that's a crime. If you take it, it's called garbage. It's insidious. The whole bloody industry is completely out of control, and it's taken all 8 million species down with it. A nuclear ban by all but those who possess the bomb. Right? They're working really hard to stop anybody else from getting a bomb that you can't use. Drones jolt a Persian Gulf focused on Iran's nuclear ambitions. Drones. There was a drone strike at the airport and a truck explosion. How many suicide bombers does it take to equal an Abrams tank or a jet fighter or even an aircraft carrier again? I forget. I done the math there one day. 6 million or something. Unit 2 of United Arab Emirates nuclear plants to start operation within months. We heard that months ago, sure. Small modular reactors might not be ready by 2030. Former New Brunswick Power CEO warns. He actually says 2035 they won't be around. Because Canada is now investing, putting all their hopes for a carbon-free future, which is no you and lots of them. Well, there's going to be a carbon-free future. Japan made sure of it, right? And they're growing food in the nuclear wasteland and shipping it worldwide. Canada's a victim, big time, of Japan at this stage. Shipping that food after 90 days non-stop. And no other country would take it, so Canada was being bombarded. That's evil. That's such a coward thing to do. How long the midnight? The doomsday clock measures more than nuclear risk. And it was only supposed to be nuclear risk. This was created by the Manhattan scientists, right? Well, the doomsday clock, for some reason, doesn't include radioactive fallout that covers the planet from Fukushima nuclear meltdown. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists is the industry. If you go look at all the people on the board, it's all industry people. Bruce Project is key to Ontario economic recovery. This is World Nuclear News. If World Nuclear News is regurgitating it, it's pure lies. 100% propaganda. They're not capable of telling the truth. If you tie your shoes up and you ask somebody from the World Nuclear News, are your shoes tied? They're like, no. Say, but look at it. And they're like, no, it's not tied. Well, look, though, before you say something. No. It's not tied. If I just tied it, well, it's not tied. How do you know? You didn't look. Don't need to. It's not tied. We're the nuclear industry. We know everything. That's logic, see? Bruce Power major component replacement is helping contribute to economic revitalization in Ontario, says creeps, lunatics, and freaks of nature. Do you really think that if nuclear disappeared and they had some other power production, it wouldn't do the exact same thing, revitalize the economy? You really think nuclear is the only thing that can revitalize the economy? And if the whole economy is based off on nuclear, what happens when you finish the project? I like to haul the ears off everybody in the industry, at least that much. Like a big hydraulic suit, and just everybody in the industry stands in front of you, you gotta pull their ears off, smack them in the back of the head. Next, France should revisit plan to shut nuclear units, says the non-regulatory agency, the captured regulatory industry. Military seeks to boost Watts Bar nuclear plant tritium output. Watts Bar. It took 44 years to build their last reactor. Came online in 2020. 44 years late. And they're going to use it to make the harmless tritium. There's no such thing as tritium from a nuclear, by the way. It's tritium-3H. The mass genocide military is seeking to boost the production of a key component of stupid nuclear arsenal at the Wattsbar nuclear plant despite criticism. The move violates international nuclear arms agreements, which it does. You're not supposed to make nuclear weapons at your local nuclear power plants. Shit for brains. Bruce Power announces several MCR contracts. Bruce Power, you notice this today? All this Bruce Power. It doesn't stop for the rest of the show, by the way. There's a big push on to make Bruce Power look semi-human. You can't make it look human, and nobody can do that. Last July, Bruce Power announced a $3 billion, which is Canadian taxpayer money, by the way, Made in Ontario plan to invest in Ontario jobs. And when you finish the refit, everybody's on unemployment again. Colorado Spring Gazette's Colorado needs nuclear power. Well, you can see the nuclear industry is well embedded in Colorado. How about an energy source can generate limitless amounts of power while leaving no carbon footprint whatsoever? Nuclear is the most carbon-intensive thing in human history, by the way, when it's running. Each nuclear power plant needs 2 external power plants dedicated to the nuclear power plant to run. Come rain or shine, day or night, wind or calm. Now that's what you could call renewable energy. Or you just call it nuclear power. Whoever wrote that, I would pull the tongue right out your arsehole if I can find you. We're trying to be realistic, and we're trying to just look at the feasibility of a small modular reactor technology in the community. You're trying to be realistic. You're putting your eggs in a basket for something that don't exist and probably won't, where you got to develop every facet of the technology rather than in something sustainable. If you took that kind of attitude and tried to develop compressed air storage or pumped hydro storage, renewable combination, you'd be up and running in 24 months instead of 24 years. You're literally the stupidest person in the last 3 seconds that I come across. Democrats feel the heat of a nuclear defeat. And so, Catherine, why are you using the word nuclear in a political context, you sack of shit, you? The FBI once confiscated a student's paper for designing a nuclear bomb. Remember that story? It was 1970s, where he actually built one the size of a basketball. The professor said, oh, that'll work. New net zero partnership, and this will make you sick. New net zero partnership fights climate change. Net zero. Bruce Power. Like, this is madness. Miles Allen was the guy who came up with the net zero, right? Hang on. It's only madness when you don't acknowledge it. That's the carbon footprint right there. Must be close by. Okay, here we go. Come on. There's it takes a few seconds for some reason. He's the guy who came up with net zero, randomly. Here's the guy who came up with global warming, and so United Nations jacked both of those narratives. The carbon footprint was a large advertising campaign by the fossil fuel BP after a oil spill, where they blamed it on you for wanting it in the first place. And how do we get your carbon footprint to come down again? I can't remember. And then you have the father of climate change, the degenerate, incredible, hateful, and degenerate James Hansen. His testimony was an important turning point in the history of global climate change. The industry is just full of grifters, eh? So for Bruce Power to claim that nuclear is net zero, I challenge you to a fight, Bruce Power, with 4-inch gloves on a pay-per-view. Estonia could get a nuclear power plant, says the stupid Prime Minister. Oh, look at me, I'm a Prime Minister. In the future, to help safeguard the economy from the price of energy crisis. Just use pumped hydro and compressed air storage and renewables, you stupid nobody, you. Is being the President, Prime Minister of Estonia really something you should brag about? Lithuania to tackle Soviet-era nuclear waste. No, they're not. It's not paid for by them either. Again, like there's so many of these stories of the Soviet Union. There was one last year, and I can't pronounce the name because it's in a different language. But it had all this, not all, but a lot of the Soviet Union nuclear subs fuel rods were in an outdoor pool in the Arctic that no containment and just hemorrhaging radiation all day into the environment for about 50 years before they finally... they had 10 countries throw in billions of dollars to try to go and clean it up. Which is the same here, by the way. A robot for removing nuclear fuel debris at Fukushima. Prepare to get a little stupider if you're not feeling stupid. Don't worry, we'll get you there. So this robot is a stick. And the stick is going to go down and get a sample of the fuel. This is the theory, right? And it was made with shit for brains to sell at fuel, United Kingdom. And what happens when the robot reaches down and touches the fuel? You can't get near the robot again. Anybody think about that, I wonder? It's more about robot, right? Oh, they got robots, Dana, at Fukushima cleaning it up, Dana! I can hear it now, right? I'm afraid to go out to the grocery shop anymore. Someone's going to go, Dana, they got robots, it's going to be okay. I counted all the tanks, by the way. There's only 750. So this robot is pointless. It's not a robot. Like your toaster is a robot, okay? Your cruise control on your car, that's a robot. These are not robots. The second this contraption touches nuclear fuel, people can't go near it again. If that goes down and touches the fuel, nobody's going to stand up there ever again. It's such a shit for brains industry, such a pointless industry. So Korea ignites a spark of nuclear fusion hope. Again, the holy grail energy source can provide mankind with clean, safe, to virtually unlimited energies. How many times have we said that in the last 5 years? 1,000 times? Discussing intersectionally in the nuclear field. It's not stupider than somebody in a military uniform. Really, there's nothing stupider. Colorado needs nuclear power. Editorial. So there's a big push on goodbye, Colorado. You're done. Which, by the way, Colorado was covered in weapons fallout from nuclear testing. Do you want a new nuclear modular reactor be considered for Katniss? A poll. Do you want a reactor that doesn't exist and is most likely not to exist? You got to wait for the technology to be developed, wait another 10 years to get the kinks out of it, wait another 10 years for the new version of that to come out. You took all that energy, money, and academics and scientists and get up and go and put it in the renewables. You can solve all the problems in no time at all. We can solve the problem if we wanted to. Like they'll take everything and throw it at nuclear, and you can't solve it. They'll take nothing and throw it at renewables, because if you solve it, nuclear becomes pointless, right? So they can't solve renewables because now nuclear is garbage. See? So they're gonna do everything they can to sabotage renewables, because renewables will sabotage nuclear if it's successful. The Scottish Forum of Nuclear-Free Local Authorities has claimed that there is little support for no nuclear, and there isn't. Just the people that want to work at it, right? They're going to support it. Stupid people, of course, they'll support it, and the Lord knows there's lots of them. I voted no, of course, so we got 3 votes, and 16 morons says yes, which is probably everybody that works at that local paper is probably 16 people. Russia-Iranian presidents meet amid talks on Iran nuclear deal. Talks. They're not having talks. They got a gun to their head. They're surrounded by 49 military bases, U.S. bases, with weapons like biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons. And 49 bases surrounding the country. And you think that's talks? You think that's negotiating? North Korea hints at resuming nuclear. Good for North Korea. I hope you build 1,000 nuclear bombs to protect yourself from the rest of the friggin' morons on the planet. And I hate nuclear weapons. But I think North Korea has been bullied enough, and it's time for them to get something to keep the rest of the world at bay. They'll never be free. The country will never be free, right? The United Nations has made sure the country has no hope of ever being free. Might as well go ahead and get it over with. In tiny Wyoming town, Bill Gates bets big on nuclear. Bill Gates didn't bet jack shit. The government threw in around $4 billion. They're making it sound like Bill Gates did. And he's talking about building a sodium reactor. Right? You might want to go look at Santa Susana or the Manju reactor in Japan before you start building stupid shit like that. This is Reuters now have a fact check. There should be like 1,000 people that fact check Reuters each day. They're perpetual. Such friggin' lawyers, hey? Why tell the truth when you can tell a lie? That seems to be the new motto. Dana, why would I want to tell the truth for? That's crazy talk. Maybe I should just lie constantly, right? Here, I'll give Reuters something to go fact check for us. Hang on. La 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 la. What did I do wrong? Hang on. Do this the hard way? Come on. Because if you try to hurry, nothing happens, right? If you take your time. Okay, here you go, Reuters. You want to fact check something? Go out and fact check that those people to the right are 100 feet above the deck of the building to the left in a fuel pool that doesn't exist. Try wrapping your mind around this.
Where I was standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So should Reuters do a fact check and see if they're actually in the fuel pool on top of a building that don't even exist? Nuclear power submarines for Australia. They want the submarines so they can go down and hang around in the Sea of China, just outside of China. Why? If China, like, you can have 1,000 nuclear subs, but if China wants to beat the shit of Australia, there's nothing you can do about it. Nuclear powered submarines from Australia. What? Like, first off, the country's dying for schools, dying for medical equipment, dying for infrastructure, dying for jobs, and you want to give them foreign nuclear subs to chew up all the money that you could use to fix the country. Just a revolting nuclear industry. North Korea warns it may rethink the moratorium. So why is all the media, every time North Korea shakes a hand, the media worldwide freaks out? Because that's United Nations, which is not a nation and not united. It's 195 militaries. Westinghouse allies with the Czech suppliers ahead of reactor project. Of course, Westinghouse went bankrupt 2017. And they're showing you nuclear power plants stood up in a farm field and take a picture. You can't eat the food from these farms, so shut down all the farms or the nuclear power plants and the farms. You can never eat the food there. Sellafield nuclear site improvements after workers suffers 20% burns from electrical. And Sellafield, look at it, surrounded by farms. And if you look at big pictures of Sellafield from the ocean inland, they got farms right up to the fences of the nuclear reactors and the fuel pools. Completely surrounded by farms as far as you can see for 100 miles. We also regulate the safe security and transport of civil nuclear radioactive materials by road, rail, and inland waterways, which is the scariest thing imaginable because you're talking about Sellafield. Rocky Flats, of course, Rocky Flats, where they made all the plutonium triggers. Refuge on a former nuclear weapons plant wants to be a good neighbor. First off, you see the fire burning in a nuclear wasteland site? Fire engulfed more than 6,000 acres. So the refuge comprises much of the former Rocky Flats nuclear weapons plant, which the FBI raided and closed down, which created plutonium triggers for bombs. And fire at the plant in 1957, 1969 caused plutonium contamination that earned the site Superfund status. And after it closed for good, which it was closed because the FBI raided it, the plant was focused on a $7 billion cleanup. Hanford, the thing estimating another $700 billion. Cleanup before 5,237 acres are reopened to the public in the fall of 2018. So over 5,000 acres is incredibly radioactive. And rather than clean it up and segregate it for 1 million years, they said, no, let your children go there, get sick and die. Northern Nuclear Alliance and Jacobs taking nuclear industry forward together. And Jacobs been at the nuclear industry since its infancy, right? So you know they're degenerates. EDF woes won't derail pro-nuclear election stance, says the experts. And Macron is frightened that he's not going to get elected if he increases the electrical bills. So the government who owns EDF has to take a hit, is what he said, for the next 4 months until he gets re-elected. The whole world is a prisoner, Stockholm Syndrome now, of the nuclear industry. The best thing to do is kill the nuclear industry with every fiber in your body. World recognizes Pakistan as a peaceful and responsible nuclear state. That's simply not true. Commends its role in Afghanistan stability. That's simply not true. Governed by morality and moral values. So around 1 million children die every year in Pakistan of dysentery, diarrhea, and pneumonia. Lawmakers ask you to give public a say on green investment rules. This is a great idea. That's a great idea because the EU is going to call nuclear. This is revolting. So what the EU done was, its presidency is 6 months at a time for different countries. So France's turn was on January the 1st. And so they put off making a decision for 12 months until France got its presidency. And then France said, yeah, nuclear is green, man. It's green. And France's whole legacy, everybody should be evacuated from France, except for the government, and that should be just popped. Colorado Spring Gazette. Colorado needs nuclear power. So you see all the major medias in Colorado pumping for nuclear, which means you don't got any media in Colorado. And by the way, Colorado is incredibly radioactive from weapons fallout. Democrats feel the heat of nuclear defeat. That showed up many times, different itinerations of it. North Korea warns it may rethink moratorium on nuclear missiles. That never stopped showing up. Russian drones over Swedish nuclear power plant. Scumbags, eh? Yeah, that was Russians. You sure it wasn't China? Gotta have a boogeyman. Like North Korea on top of it. Right, so the boogeyman for America is North Korea, China, and Russia. Not necessarily in that order. North Korea, and so over and over and over and over in the last 24 hours, we've seen this headline. Look at that piece of shit right there. Executive returns to Westinghouse Electric as CTO. And she just came out of working for the Americans, the despicable piece of shit. Marks her return to the company where she worked for nearly a decade after 2 years stint with the degenerate U.S. Department of Energy. The people that work for the U.S. Department of Energy are not people. They're bizarre creatures from some other galaxies. She previously held leadership positions in Westinghouse. Is that why it went bankrupt, I suppose? Working paper on strategic risk reduction. And so they cover, like, when you look at nuclear, I might go, say, through 1,000, 2,000 studies. And a lot of it, I can't use it for whatever reason. It's got nothing to do with this facet of it, but it's nuclear, right? They've studied the nuclear elements 100,000 times more than they've studied the natural elements of the solar system. Practical measures, and they killed billions and billions and billions and billions of animals. Never cured a single animal with radiation. Kishida to discuss nuclear-free world. Does that mean he's going to stop shipping food from a nuclear wasteland? They're going to let the international community go in there and put out Fukushima? To discuss the nuclear-free weapons is what he's talking about. First off, he's poisoning the entire planet with radioactive food from the nuclear wasteland, for goodness sakes. Nukes of hazards. Drone attack in Iran nuclear plant could cause a new Chernobyl. So I may want to tell that to Israel. The nukes of hazard. Leave it up to the United Kingdom's son to say something like that. They're such revolting people at that paper, aren't they? Small modular reactor market. Growing rapidly. 18 billion by 2030. So 18 billion, you can only build about 4 small modular reactors if you were to go at it with that kind of money. So this is about investments. And that's a losing investment. Because renewables Archbishop invites dialogue towards nuclear disarmament. North Korea hints at lifting moratoriums on nuclear. Tunnel complex at Nat's nuclear facility in Iran deeper than expected. They actually got to have anti-aircraft artillery there because of, at your nuclear plant, because of threats from other countries. Got to go and blow up your nuclear plant, turn it into a Chernobyl. Examination report on nuclear power station plan delayed by 6 weeks. This is Sizewell. This is a new plant they're going to build in the United Kingdom, surrounded by farms. This is madness. This is absolutely madness. This is absolute madness. 6 people to sue TEPCO over thyroid cancer. And, right, so this sounds like a really small number, but it's actually 13,646 out of 40,000 had tumors. Drone flights over nuclear plant sparks a Swedish investigation, which they claim now is a Russian drone. The drone was seen over Forsmark, was able to maneuver despite strong winds, and a pursuing police helicopter lost track of it over the sea. So they're really building it into something that is not, obviously, right? Warning over Coburg after, and they're claiming that the drone is there to map it out for terrorists. Right, they're seized upon that drone now over a Swedish nuclear power plant. They've turned that into a mass terrorist psychosis for the whole country. Warning over Coburg after Matashi boots nuclear regulator board member. So he was supposed to be the independent guy, and he got booted as they were going to shut it down for a refit. And they didn't tell him or anything like that. They were too cowardly to tell it to him. He found out the hard way. And so why would you get rid of the only independent observer? Well, because you don't want him to see what's going on. And so why would you trust South Africa ever again when they're doing stuff like that? Nuclear medicine equipment market. First, there's no such thing as nuclear medicine. There really isn't, right? Nuclear medicine doesn't cure you. We got the studies shown that only 2% of people treated with chemotherapy survives longer with it than without it. Let me see if I can find that study for you very quick. Well, I'm just ran into the ground. It's been a long day. I never put the tarp on the boat because we didn't get a lot of snow, and I kept putting it off because it was heavy winds, right? And on the day when it wasn't heavy winds, it was just like minus 18. I was like, it'll warm up in a couple of days, I'll do it. And so now we're going to have 5 to 10 centimeters tomorrow, and then 5 centimeters a day after, 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 5 centimeters the day after. And the tarp that was on it was shredded. It's only 2 years old, but it's absolutely shredded. And so I picked up the tarp probably 3 weeks ago or something. And today it was heavy rains, heavy winds, and I was determined to get the tarp on it. And because the tarp was shredded, it was wrapped around the radar and the tow post and everything like that. Even the lights, it was wrapped in around all of that. And you had to get up and climb around and bust it up. And it was raining sideways, so I was so wet at the end of it. I had to go in and change my clothing because I couldn't move. My jacket weighed about 30 pounds or something because it was soaking wet. It was unbelievable. I had to mop the floors to the dryer because I took it and threw it in the dryer, and it's just this puddle of water everywhere. I was like, oh my God. And then I finally got it on. What a struggle that was. Well, it's on. So that's good news. I was worried sick, right? I was going to get caught out and have a big snowstorm. The boat fills up. Because the tarp is always fluttering a little bit, and it keeps the snow from building up. Because if you get a lot of snow, you can break a lot of things, right? You can't have that happen to you. Study, Dana. Go get the study. Okay. Westinghouse. Just bear with me. Here we go. It's showing a couple extra ones there for us, a little bonus. Okay, so this one is real straightforward. 3% efficiency of chemotherapy treatments on cancer cure. The original conclusion based on facts, 1985, and current validation of these conclusions, 2004. And so the study shows estimated to be 2.3% in Australia and 2.1%. Where'd you go, Dana? I never went nowhere. And 2.1% in the United States and Canada. And conclusions justify the continuing funding of the availability of the drug used in chemotherapy. It's basically calling it pointless. In fact, what they said was that it is clear to state we're losing the war on cancer. In fact, I believe that based on clinical oncology documents, it is safe to state that we lost ground. 3% in 1985 was horrific. Perhaps everyone should contemplate to think of chemotherapy as an alternate route. And not only that, they said, in fact, you have better chances of survival if you don't use it. Where did it all go wrong for Riva? They went bankrupt and became Orano. Westinghouse went bankrupt. Paladin got $500 million off Australia, then they went bankrupt. North Korea hints and may resume talks. So that's a different one. Or, I'm sorry, nuclear tests. What was I thinking? President Biden announced his nominee for ambassadors in key roles. And one of them, of course, was Catherine Huff, the Assistant Secretary for the Nuclear Energy Department of Energies. They almost always... Nuclear industry likes to, for some reason, use a woman for a lot of these positions. NATO ready to resume briefing with Russia or exercises. NATO, of course, has been around since the 40s. And they're just a bunch of countries they're a gang of countries. And if you attack one country, then the gang will attack you back. Mystery drones over Sweden sparks security scares. This is fear-mongering in overdrive, by the way. Look to the skies. Stockholmers looked to the skies and wondered whether the drones were coming back. This is 100% fear-mongering. Over recent days, reports have multiplied of black-winged flying machines at night over a range of sensitive sites, including 3 nuclear power stations, a water treatment plant, and a royal palace. And show what appeared to be a drone flying over an amusement park. This is Politico on top of that. This is unbelievable fear-mongering, by the way. What the fuck is anybody going to attack Sweden for? Is like China going to go over and attack Australia? Give me a break. How safe is South Africa's Coburg nuclear power station? It was built using inferior material, and after 30 years becomes very brittle, even if you use the best of the best. And this thing is way older than 30 years. And it's already got identified problems, multiple cracks, and it's on an earthquake fault line. And the people that are in charge didn't put any money away for decommissioning it. Nothing but profit. So there's no incentive to switch it off because it's pure profit. Speak out against radioactive water dump. Holtec's proposed action to dump radioactive wastewater from the now closed Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station into Massachusetts Bay is a threat to the citizens of Massachusetts. It's an intolerable injury to the environment, public health, economy, and the reputation of Massachusetts itself. Well said. If carried out, the violations of public trust will further erode the faith in the government to protect its citizens, which is never going to do in the first place, from corporate malfeasance and greed, which are the same basically. It will inevitably undermine long-term quality of life for short-term corporate profit. That is the game, right? Organize and unite to save our community's health, natural resources, tourism, and property values. You forgot fresh water. Holtec has informed the NRC that it plans to discharge the liquid, the radiation, sometimes in the first quarter of 22. Since then, Holtec backtracked, said it was not going to discharge the radioactively contaminate during 2022. But what then? We need to remain alert because Holtec can dispose of the radioactive water without the NRC approval. So the industry has gone into overdrive on evilness. Bruce Power named one of Canada's top employers for young people for 11th year. They want young people because they don't really question things, right? They don't want people there that are critical thinkers. They want young, dumb. For 11 years straight, for 11 consecutive years, you know, for the last 7 years, Fukushima sake is considered the best in Japan. You'd have to be pretty nutty to eat it. Hang on, I gotta get some cough juice into me. Oh, yummy. At least I can talk anyway. Conference for Iran regime condemned for genocide. The Americans and the British went to Afghanistan and they flattened every building in the entire country. Every school, every hospital, they flattened every building. They fired depleted uranium munitions into the entire country. They fired 5.5 million rounds a month for 9 years to get 10,000 Taliban. But Iran is accused of genocide. It's absurd. Stupid, stupid, stupid military. People in the military are literally the stupidest people I've ever come across. This is Russian troops in Belarus pose a direct threat. Yeah, no kidding. North Korea warns it may rethink moratorium on nuclear. Who cares? That was a weird one, actually. Lawmakers introduced foreign policy resolution. Specifically calls for cutting waste, fraud, and abuse in the military. Good luck. At a concern by nuclear regulator board suspension of civil society rep. That's South Africa's Coburg plant again. Yeah, removed just as they're about to get in discussions of how much damage is there that they need to repair to get a 20-year extension. They kicked him out. South Korea ignites a spark of nuclear fusion hope. It's such a fable, eh? The biggest joke, of course, nuclear fusion. You don't need nuclear fusion. You're trying to develop a technology for, 75 years or something? If you spent the same people and the same money to develop renewable energy, you would have cracked that a long time ago. And you're going to put all your dreams and hopes into a technology that can never come to fruition. It's outrageous. It's just outrageous. It's a complete and utter contempt. Fears James Fisher nuclear building could fall into the river Ethen in Egremont, which is in Cumbria in the United Kingdom, is it? I don't know the story on that, so I'm not going to say nothing. It's not a nuclear building like it sounds, but it's the sounds of it. The Web of Ordinary Women Who Help End the Cold War. That's a great story. The documentary Mothers of Revolution tells the story of the remarkable female-led resistance against nuclear weapons in the 1980s. We've covered the story many times here over the years. And we've seen media come out and say that they were all lesbians and derogatory stuff like that. It was outrageous, the slander against these incredibly courageous people. But if you want a good read, that's a good read for you right there. And that's defenses of the defense place where they protested. They still won't leave them alone. Jellyfish babies from the Marshall Islands gave birth to something resembling eggs of a sea turtle, and Flora gave birth to something like the intestines. A beginner's guide to tungsten. It said you won't find a mightier metal than tungsten, which is harder and denser and more heat resistant than almost any other element on the periodic table, which is true. Depleted uranium is not on the periodic table, see? DOLRAM used to be called depleted uranium low-level radioactive material. But they got rid of the latter part of that acronym. Nobody knows why. And we know why. And just called it depleted uranium. So the average person who knows nothing about the subject, well, it's depleted, don't matter. Well, it's not depleted. And it's a crime to call it depleted, by the way. Israel and Iran nuclear deal. Why would Iran cut a deal with a scumbag like Israel for? No country watches as closely as Israel. Well, I was laughing. We covered the story a couple of weeks ago of Iran built a mock-up of Israel's Dimona nuclear power plant, and we're doing target practice on it. That was awesome. History repeating itself as Russia considers installing troops in Cuba. What's the point? What's the point of doing something like that anyway? Right? Just cause endless fear-mongering, right? Nuclear medicine is a genocide machine. I didn't figure that story out. I didn't read the rest of it. I'll read it probably the weekend, though. Iran's revolution is eating its own. No, it's not. Iran has been isolated for quite a long time. There's 49 military bases on its border. For God's sakes. Sellafield implements safety improvements after man suffers burns. I can guarantee you, right, that first off, Sellafield is surrounded by farmland. Sellafield still has a nuclear meltdown going on there from a mixed oxide meltdown in the 50s, where there's 8 million liters a day of mixed oxide water going into the ocean for 70 plus years now, into the Atlantic. EDF may need to stop new reactors to check circuits. France. What next, France? Taxonomy role, which is EU. Macron's EU presidency speech. Well, first off, France, they never made a decision for nuclear to be in that conversation until the EU presidency was handed over to France on January the 1st of this year. We're almost through. China views US as competitor and treats itself as a lone competitor. Yeah, of course. Said a Canada-based think tank. See, that's not information. That's a think tank set up to vilify China by the industry itself. And then they throw money at a newspaper to run their narrative. And Google gets a chunk of the pie and puts it up on the main pages. Speculates if China could be concerned that the U.S. re-emphasis on low-yield nuclear weapons in recent years indicated lower threshold for nuclear use. This is nonsense. You really think that the Americans are going to use a nuclear weapon on China? They wanted to in the 50s, right? We covered that story. Because the military is lunatic. New Israel submarines to have new capabilities. So apparently they're going to be able to launch nuclear missiles from underwater that they can't use in the first place. International Energy Agency predicts lackluster growth for natural gas-fired power generation. Well, the International Energy Association estimated that by 2026, renewables will be around 4,900 gigawatts, which is more energy than all nuclear power plants and fossil fuel gas included on the planet. So in another 4 years or so, a revolution is going to be quite clear to everybody. So before we get to that stage, the nuclear industry is going to go into panic mode and try to drown everybody on the planet with them. Fake news of the week, the Berlin power cut. Another fact checker, right? Look at that. Anyway, who cares, right? Daily on energy, some backstory on Europe's energy crisis. And this is coming from Oxford University, who brought us people like Wade Allison. What's the point of listening to them or trusting them? You know bloody well that they're not going to be honest. Ah yes, Pompei backs new missile defense. Former Secretary of State, scumbag, is calling for a new Reagan era, which was lasers, right, in space and nuclear, satellites. Strategic Defense Initiative to counter growing nuclear and conventional strategic threats posed by China. So just endless fear-mongering, just relentless, insidious fear-mongering. They're going to launch a new UK offshore wind program. If you put your windmills on the mountains where the wind blows all the time, you wouldn't even need storage. Again, nuclear medicine is unbelievably evil. Jailed French tourist appeared in Iran court on Tuesday on spying charges. Do you know how they originally, it was like 50 years ago or something, but the CIA had went into Iran, had smuggled in printers and paper and not paper, but printers. And what they were doing, they were printing up propaganda about people in positions of authority in Iran. They were printing that up and they were paying people to go out and distribute it on the streets. And they actually caused a bloody riot by doing that to overthrow the government down there at the time. Because being evil comes natural to these people. Global nuclear medicine, radiopharmaceutical. All of these people should be arrested and shot. Not necessarily in that order. In the 1980s, the Pentagon was preparing a nuclear war in Iran. A nuclear war against a country with no nuclear. Works in the nuclear medicine area, Juan Ramos hospital. See, this is some scary stuff, eh? There's no such thing as nuclear medicine. There's death by fake nuclear medicine, but there is no nuclear medicine that I can find. I've been at this for a very long time. Nuclear decommissioning market. You got Areva, which is now, of course, Orano. Hitachi, degenerate Hitachis. Even Westinghouse, look at that. And Jacobs, of course. Nuclear plant life extensions, market research. And whenever you see any of that stuff, it's always forecasted growth. The industry refuses to issue pullback. Nuclear battery market, like, this is evilness on top. There was actually 1,000 lighthouses that had nuclear for a power source. They had to decommission every one of them, of course. Defenders of the environment can only say no, a vicious cycle from which we cannot escape. And the picture, of course, is a nuclear power plant in the background, surrounded by food, by farms. The ultimate evil, the most insidious evil imaginable, is to have a nuclear power plant built in farmlands. It's unbelievably evil. It's neither safe nor clean, it's right. It never ends with the nuclear industry. A volcanic eruption near Tonga more powerful than a nuclear bomb. It was likely the loudest event on the planet in the past 100 years, the Tonga event. And the bloody media didn't even report it properly. It's unbelievable. Got a loud cheer here tonight. It's okay. There's your atoms for peace. Well, there we go. That was a tough gig tonight, eh? There's a lot of work today to pull that off. It's 130 something stories we touched on. I always like these types of show though, because there's so much info. And so how did our poll go tonight? Really bad, but it looks of it. Look at that. Is encouraging people to live 2 kilometers from Fukushima multiple ongoing nuclear meltdowns evil? 90%, 89% says yes, but 11% accidentally said no. I don't know why anybody would say no. What the hell? Why would you say no for? I'm going to end that poll. 44 votes. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, James Lucid. Donated. I'll show other people how to donate too while we're here, I suppose. Bless you, James. This is the live show here. 44. And if you scroll all the way down below it, and there's a lot there tonight, isn't there? That's the only 2 ways you can donate is both of these. So the first one is the PayPal directly to me. And the next one is the nuclear proctologist to my website. And you let the page load up. You see a picture. You see the donate button, but hang on. Once the picture showed up, you're pretty well loaded up. There's a donate button right there. And you can donate with credit cards right there. It's really easy to do, and it's completely safe and effective. The same thing with PayPal. Same thing with PayPal. And this is the show right here, by the way. I gotta hang on 1 second. Yeah. Because as soon as I go live, Google changed the settings. And so you can't embed till I come back in and click that. And sometimes I forget, so now you can. But as soon as the stream goes live, hi everybody. Yeah, no, like I worked like a dog today, and then I done a lot of this last night and the rest of it today and tonight. And so yeah, it's over already. That was a good show. Lots and lots and lots and lots of little tidbits, right? So instead of going into great detail constantly, these shows are kind of fun because you got so much coming at you from so many angles. Atoms for Humanity, the A10 Warthog murder machine. Let me say goodnight to everybody. Yeah. And click the like button, that's right, thank yous. Blue Jay, Richard, Peaceware, Albert. Good night, everybody. Dana Nasana. Thank you. James, Megan, which I probably butchered your name again. I apologize. Robert, James Lucid again. Thank you, James. I hope other people donate too. Yeah. I'm just going to do a quick shout out for everybody very quickly. Slowly. I don't do jack shit quick anyway. I take my time for everything, so. I'm just scrolling up through the comment sections looking for any names to give a quick shout out. This last show of the week. We'll be back on Sunday. And we're going to have snow. I'll be in the woods all day tomorrow. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Coming up, I'll be in the woods each day. I'll still do my show each night, though. Dave Holly, Port Angeles. Good night, everybody. Jeff, Zoke. Turn that down a little bit for you. We're almost finished. And lots of people, but not a Katja and everybody watching this from home later. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great weekend. Thinker, Shayla White, and I'll come down to the most recent comments, I guess. The pennies. If I missed anybody, my apology. I'll come down to the most recent comments. We'll call it a night. I desperately want a cup of tea. Daryl. Yeah, it looks like I caught everybody. Like I say. Lots of people wait for Friday or Saturday to watch the show because it's the last show of the week. And that's okay. That's why it's here. It's here so you can watch it at your convenience. I do it live shows because I want the people that are searching when they find the show to say, hey, wait, that was streamed today or this week? That's still pertinent? And policymakers, investors and people in the industry. James Appleton, yeah, hugs for you. Hugs for everybody. God bless everybody. Have a great night and a great couple of days. We'll see everybody. I'll probably be streaming from the trail tomorrow because we can now stream in